When I think about how my life unraveled, it feels surreal. Looking back, I wouldn't have believed that my seemingly stable and happy marriage could be torn apart by a few innocent words from my 6-year-old son. But life, I've learned, has a way of blindsiding you. My name is Adam, I'm 35 years old, and I work as a financial advisor. For the last 9 years, I've been married to Melissa, who's 33 and the owner of a small boutique in town. On the surface, we looked like the textbook definition of a happy family. We had a modest but comfortable home, a lively little boy named Liam, and a routine that felt stable, if not a little predictable. Melissa and I met in college, where her charm and creativity drew me in from the start. She had this magnetic energy, always dreaming big and chasing her passions. I loved that about her. While I pursued a practical degree in finance, Melissa poured her heart into design and fashion, eventually opening her boutique. We were opposites in many ways, but we complemented each other. Or so I thought. Liam, our son, is the kind of kid who lights up every room he enters. He's bright, endlessly curious, and has a knack for saying exactly what's on his mind. As exhausting as his boundless energy can be, he's also the glue that holds us together on the tougher days. If Melissa and I ever had disagreements, we'd remind ourselves that we had to be a team for Liam. But lately, I had started to notice cracks in that team dynamic. Melissa had always been busy with her boutique, but over the past few months, her work commitments seemed to expand beyond reason. She began leaving the house more often in the evenings, claiming she had to meet clients or attend events to promote her store. At first, I didn't think much of it. She's always been ambitious, and I admired her drive. But her sudden protectiveness over her phone and her reluctance to share details about these outings planted a small, nagging seed of doubt in my mind. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. Melissa had given me no real reason to distrust her over the years, and I didn't want to start being that guy, the paranoid husband who read too much into things. I figured the stress of running a small business might just be getting to her, so I tried to be supportive. I took on more responsibilities at home to give her some breathing room. If she needed extra time to focus on her career, I was happy to step up. But then, Liam started saying things, innocent, offhand comments, that didn't add up. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Melissa had gone out, claiming she had a meeting with a new supplier. Liam and I were playing with his toy dinosaurs in the living room when he blurted out something that stopped me in my tracks. "Daddy, why does Mommy always see Uncle Mike at her work meetings?" "Uncle Mike?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and casual. Mike wasn't our actual uncle, he was a family friend, someone we'd known for years. He worked in real estate and had no connection to Melissa's boutique, as far as I knew. "Yeah," Liam said, lining up his toy dinos in a row. "He brought me chocolate last time, but Mommy said not to tell you." The room felt like it had tilted on its axis. I didn't know what to say. Mike had always been friendly, maybe a little too friendly at times, but I'd never had any reason to suspect anything inappropriate. Yet here was my 6-year-old, unknowingly opening a door I wasn't ready to walk through. I laughed it off, brushing the comment aside for the moment, but it stuck with me. Why would Melissa be meeting Mike? Why would she tell Liam not to mention it to me? It didn't sit right. The nagging doubt that I'd pushed aside for weeks began to grow, gnawing at the edges of my mind. That was the moment everything started to change. Liam's innocent slip-up planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I wanted to. What started as a small ripple would soon become a tidal wave, sweeping away the life I thought I knew. Melissa came home that evening around 7:30, just as Liam and I were finishing dinner. She walked in with her usual confident stride, her hair perfectly styled, and a bright smile on her face. She kissed Liam on the forehead, ruffled his hair, and then turned to me, placing a peck on my cheek. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her tone breezy. "The supplier meeting ran over. These new fabrics are amazing, though. Can't wait to show you." I nodded, forcing a smile. No problem. Dinner's in the oven if you're hungry. As she disappeared into the kitchen, I couldn't shake the unease bubbling beneath the surface. I told myself to let it go. I didn't have any proof of anything. For all I knew, Liam's comment about Uncle Mike could have been a simple misunderstanding. He was 6, he probably misheard something or let his imagination run wild. But still, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to Melissa's behavior. It wasn't like I was spying on her, I just couldn't help but notice little things that I might have overlooked before. Her phone, for example, was always within arm's reach. Melissa had never been particularly private about her phone in the past. If she got a text or a call while we were watching TV, she'd casually glance at it or even hand it to me to see a funny meme or a text from her mom. But now, her phone seemed glued to her side. One evening, I caught her tilting the screen away from me as she typed out a message. It was subtle, but it stood out to me. I didn't say anything at the time, telling myself I was being paranoid, but the small details kept piling up. Her schedule, too, became more erratic. She started leaving earlier in the mornings and coming home later, often citing client meetings or boutique events. When I asked her how things were going at the boutique, she gave vague answers, brushing off the details in a way that didn't feel like her. Normally, Melissa loved to talk about her work, her successes, her ideas, even her challenges. But now, she seemed eager to avoid the subject altogether. It was a Friday afternoon when Liam, once again, unknowingly fanned the flames of my growing suspicion. I had just picked him up from school, and we were driving home when he started talking about his day, his words tumbling out in rapid-fire excitement like they always did. "Mommy was late picking me up yesterday," he said between bites of the granola bar I'd handed him. I frowned. "Late? What do you mean?" "She told me she got you on time. She came after Uncle Mike. He stayed with me until she got there. He let me play a game on his phone." Liam grinned, clearly thrilled by the memory. The pit in my stomach grew heavier. "Uncle Mike was at your school?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah. He said he was helping Mommy. She said not to tell you because you'd get mad." This time, I didn't brush it off. My chest tightened as I gripped the steering wheel, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. "Well, Mommy probably just didn't want me to worry," I said, even though the words felt hollow as they left my mouth. When we got home, Melissa was already there, lounging on the couch with her laptop. She looked up and smiled as we walked in, her expression warm and relaxed. "How was school, buddy?" she asked Liam. "Good. I told Daddy about Uncle Mike." My stomach dropped as I watched her reaction. Her smile froze for the briefest moment before she recovered, laughing lightly. "Oh, yeah. Mike happened to be nearby and offered to help. Isn't he sweet?" Her tone was light, almost too light, and it set off alarms in my head. "You didn't mention that yesterday," I said, keeping my voice steady. Melissa shrugged. "It wasn't a big deal. I was running late, and Mike was kind enough to help out." "Why, is something wrong?" I wanted to press further, to ask why she'd told Liam to keep it a secret, but I held back. I didn't want to start a fight in front of our son. Instead, I nodded and forced a smile. "No, just caught me by surprise, that's all." Inside, though, I was anything but calm. Liam's words, combined with Melissa's increasingly odd behavior, left me feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground beneath me to crumble. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Over the next week, I found myself in a state of quiet turmoil. Every interaction with Melissa felt slightly off, like there was an invisible barrier between us. I tried to push away the doubts gnawing at me, telling myself that I was overreacting. But Liam's innocent words kept replaying in my mind, making it impossible to fully trust my instincts. Melissa's outings continued, and so did her secrecy. She had another supplier meeting one evening, leaving just after dinner. I kissed her goodbye at the door, feigning normalcy, but as soon as she left, I found myself staring at her phone charger still plugged into the wall. Her phone had been sitting there earlier while we ate, but now it was gone, tucked away in her purse like it always was these days. I sat on the couch, flipping aimlessly through channels, trying to distract myself, but my thoughts kept circling back to the same question: why would she tell Liam to keep secrets from me? And why was Mike suddenly popping up in situations that didn't make sense? It wasn't just paranoia. I knew Melissa, or at least I thought I did, and this wasn't like her. She was meticulous, open, and organized. She thrived on routine and planning, traits that had drawn me to her in the first place. But now, her explanations didn't line up, and her once predictable schedule was filled with convenient vagueness. A few days later, the unease deepened. It was Saturday morning, and Melissa was getting ready to leave for another so-called boutique event. I was in the kitchen pouring a second cup of coffee when Liam wandered in, still in his pajamas, dragging his favorite blanket behind him. "Mommy's going to see Uncle Mike again," he said casually, climbing onto the bar stool. My hand froze mid-pour. "What makes you say that, buddy?" "She was talking to him on the phone just now," he said, kicking his legs back and forth. "She said she'd see him soon." I swallowed hard, setting down the coffee pot. "Did she say where they were going?" He shook his head, already distracted by the cereal box on the counter. "No, but she was smiling a lot." A sick, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. I walked into the living room where Melissa was putting on her shoes. "Heading out?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah, I'll be gone for most of the day. Don't wait up for lunch, there are leftovers in the fridge." Her response was so nonchalant, so routine, that it might have fooled me if I weren't already on high alert. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to appear casual. "By the way, Liam mentioned you were talking to Mike earlier." She paused, looking up at me with a flicker of surprise that she quickly masked. "Oh, yeah. He's been helping me with some business stuff. He knows a lot of people in real estate, and I thought he might have some contacts who'd be interested in our boutique events." Her explanation sounded rehearsed, too smooth to be spontaneous. I nodded, pretending to accept it. "Makes sense. I didn't realize you two were working together." She smiled, slipping her purse over her shoulder. "It's nothing formal, just a favor between friends." With that, she kissed me on the cheek and walked out the door, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. That afternoon, as Liam played in the backyard, I sat on the couch with my laptop, staring blankly at the screen. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. On the one hand, Melissa had given me no concrete reason to suspect her, just vague excuses and a few inconsistencies. On the other hand, the gut feeling that something was wrong was becoming impossible to ignore. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed answers. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but the uncertainty was eating me alive. If Melissa was being unfaithful, or even if she wasn't, but was hiding something important, I had to know. That evening, as I tucked Liam into bed, he gave me a hug and whispered, "I love you, Daddy." His small arms around my neck were a reminder of what was truly at stake. Whatever was happening between Melissa and me, it couldn't be allowed to hurt him. After Liam fell asleep, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Melissa yet, I didn't have enough to go on. But I needed to start looking for answers, no matter how uncomfortable the process might be. That night, I lay awake long after Melissa had fallen asleep. She was turned away from me, her breathing soft and even, but I couldn't find any peace. The uncertainty had burrowed deep into my chest, leaving me restless and on edge. I kept telling myself that I wasn't the kind of man who snoops, who digs into his wife's private life without reason. But what if there was a reason? What if she was hiding something that could tear apart our family? The thought of Liam's innocent face, oblivious to the tension swirling around him, pushed me to act. I needed to know, even if I didn't want to. The next morning, Melissa left for the boutique, claiming she had inventory to sort. It wasn't unusual for her to work weekends, but I noticed she avoided making eye contact when she told me she'd be gone for most of the day. As soon as she walked out the door, I set Liam up with a movie in the living room and grabbed her laptop. I knew her password. It was one of those small details you pick up over years of marriage, though she had never explicitly shared it with me. My hands trembled slightly as I typed it in. This felt wrong, like I was crossing a line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was buried here. Her email opened without issue, and at first, everything seemed normal. Most of her recent messages were work-related, notes from suppliers, marketing ideas for her boutique, and some correspondence with clients. But as I scrolled further, a name jumped out at me, Mike. There weren't many emails from him, but one caught my attention. It was titled, Thursday Plans, sent just 2 days earlier. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Looking forward to seeing you again. Same place as last time. Let me know if anything changes. It wasn't overtly incriminating, but it didn't sit right with me either. Why was Mike emailing her about meeting up? Why hadn't she mentioned it? My heart raced as I searched for more clues. Her phone bill was my next stop. I hadn't looked at it in months. Melissa always paid it along with the rest of our household bills. But with a few clicks, I was able to access the recent call logs. There it was, dozens of calls and texts to Mike's number, far more than anyone else besides me. I felt sick. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was mounting. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Later that afternoon, while Liam napped, I decided to drive past Melissa's boutique. I told myself it was just to confirm she was really there. Maybe I'd see her working through the window, busy with inventory or chatting with customers. But when I pulled up to the small shop on Main Street, the lights were off, and the closed sign hung on the door. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the empty storefront. My heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking in my chest. If she wasn't at the boutique, where was she? Part of me wanted to call her right then and there, to demand an explanation, but I held back. I didn't want to confront her without more concrete proof. Still, the nagging suspicion that she was lying to me, and that Mike was somehow involved, was becoming impossible to ignore. I returned home, trying to mask my unease. Liam was still asleep, his small form curled up on the couch, clutching his blanket. I watched him for a moment, my heart aching. He deserved better than this. He deserved parents who were honest with each other, who could provide him with a stable, loving home. That evening, Melissa came home later than usual, her excuse vague and unconvincing. I didn't press her, but my silence must have been noticeable. She glanced at me a few times during dinner, her brow furrowing slightly as if she sensed something was wrong. I couldn't hold her gaze. All I could think about was the unanswered questions swirling in my mind, and the growing certainty that the life I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers. The days that followed were a blur of tension and suspicion. I felt like I was living in a haze, pretending everything was normal while my mind worked overtime to piece together the fragments of what I discovered. Melissa was behaving as if nothing was wrong, but that only added to the weight pressing down on me. How could she act so normal if she was hiding something so serious? I started paying closer attention to her schedule. Every time she mentioned a meeting, an errand, or a boutique event, I made a mental note of it. I even began discreetly tracking her movements when I could, driving past the places she said she'd be and checking if her story held up. More often than not, I found nothing definitive. But every now and then, something wouldn't add up, a missing car at the boutique, an unexplained delay in her return home. It wasn't until the following Thursday that I found something I couldn't dismiss. Melissa had told me she had a supplier meeting in the afternoon and would be gone until dinner time. I dropped Liam off at school and decided to follow her, keeping a careful distance as her car left our neighborhood. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad spy movie. My palms were sweaty on the steering wheel, and my heart raced as I tailed her down the highway. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that she'd pull into the parking lot of a fabric supplier or a vendor's warehouse, and I'd feel like an idiot for doubting her. But that's not where she went. Instead, she turned into the parking lot of a small cafe on the outskirts of town, one we'd never been to before. I parked a few spaces away, my stomach churning as I watched her get out of the car. She was dressed casually but neatly, her hair styled in loose waves, and she looked happy. Relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. A few minutes later, another car pulled into the lot, and Mike stepped out. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I watched him walk over to her. She greeted him with a smile, and they hugged, longer than a friendly hug, longer than was comfortable for me to witness. They went inside together, and I sat there, frozen. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to storm in, demand an explanation, and end this charade once and for all. But another part of me, the part that was still clinging to denial, told me to wait, to watch, to gather more proof. I stayed in the car for over an hour, my thoughts racing. When they finally came out, they were laughing, their heads close together as they walked to their cars. They didn't kiss, but the intimacy between them was undeniable. My stomach twisted as I watched Melissa wave goodbye and drive away, her expression still light and carefree. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty parking lot. The reality of what I'd seen was sinking in, and it felt like a physical blow. This wasn't just my imagination or paranoia. Melissa was meeting Mike in secret, and it wasn't just about work. That evening, she came home and acted as if nothing had happened. She chatted about her meeting, asked about Liam's day at school, and even laughed at a joke I made during dinner. I played along, my heart heavy with the weight of what I now knew. After Liam went to bed, I sat in the living room, nursing a beer and staring at the TV without really seeing it. Melissa joined me, curling up on the couch with her phone. She glanced at me once or twice, as if sensing my distance, but she didn't say anything. I wanted to confront her then and there, to tell her I knew about the cafe and the lies and Mike. But I wasn't ready. I needed time to process, to figure out what this meant for us, for Liam, for everything we'd built together. I went to bed that night with a growing sense of dread. The cracks in our marriage were no longer invisible, they were gaping wounds, and I wasn't sure if they could ever be healed. The confrontation was inevitable. By the time Friday evening rolled around, I couldn't hold it in any longer. The lies, the secrecy, the cafe meeting with Mike, it all weighed on me like a storm cloud ready to burst. I didn't plan it, didn't rehearse what I'd say or how I'd approach her. It just happened. Melissa had just put Liam to bed and joined me in the kitchen. I was at the sink, rinsing dishes, trying to keep my emotions in check. She leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone, seemingly unaware of the tension radiating from me. "Did you get everything sorted with the supplier yesterday?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She glanced up, her face neutral. "Yeah, everything went smoothly. We finalized the fabric orders for the spring line." I turned off the faucet and dried my hands, taking a deep breath before I turned to face her. "Funny, because I drove by the boutique yesterday. It was closed." Her eyes flickered with something, surprise, maybe, or panic, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, I wasn't at the boutique. I met the supplier at a cafe instead." I nodded slowly, the knot in my chest tightening. "And Mike was there too?" This time, her reaction was more obvious. She stiffened slightly, her grip tightening on her phone. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you lied to me, Melissa," I said, my voice firm but not raised. "You told me you were meeting a supplier, but you were at a cafe with Mike. I saw you." Her face paled, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then she sighed and placed her phone down on the counter. "Adam, It's not what you think. I laughed bitterly, crossing my arms. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. You've been sneaking around, meeting Mike behind my back, and lying to me about it. So why don't you tell me what's going on? Melissa ran a hand through her hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. Mike and we've been talking, that's all. He's been helping me with some personal stuff, nothing inappropriate, I swear. Personal stuff, I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You expect me to believe that after everything I've seen? After all the lies? It wasn't lies, she shot back, her tone defensive. I just didn't think you'd understand. Understand what? I demanded, my frustration boiling over. That you've been keeping secrets from me? That you've been involving our son in those secrets? Liam told me about Mike, about the chocolate, about the things you told him not to tell me. How do you explain that? Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked genuinely shaken. Liam told you? Of course he did. He's 6, Melissa. He doesn't know how to lie or keep secrets, not the way you apparently do. The words hung in the air, heavy and bitter. Melissa looked away, her jaw tightening. Fine, she said quietly. Yes, I've been seeing Mike. But it's not an affair, Adam. I swear. It's just. I've been feeling lost lately. Stressed. Unhappy. Mike noticed, and he offered to talk. That's all it's been, talking. I stared at her, trying to gauge if she was telling the truth. But even if she was, it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. And you couldn't talk to me? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. You couldn't come to your husband instead of sneaking around with another man? I didn't want to burden you, she said, tears welling in her eyes. You're always so busy with work, with Liam. I didn't know how to bring it up. Her explanation sounded hollow, like a poorly rehearsed excuse. I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides. You had plenty of chances, Melissa. But instead, you chose to lie. To drag our son into it. Do you have any idea what that's done to me? To us? Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. I'm sorry, Adam. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do. Her words might have carried more weight if I hadn't seen the way she looked at Mike, the way she smiled and laughed with him at the cafe. Whether she admitted it or not, something more than talking was happening between them. And I wasn't sure I could forgive her for it. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. I need some time to think, I said quietly. And I think you do too. Melissa didn't say anything, and for a long moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the hum of the refrigerator. Then she quietly picked up her phone and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts, and the shattered pieces of our marriage. After the confrontation, the house fell into an uneasy silence. Melissa and I barely spoke over the next few days, communicating only when necessary and even then keeping it brief. The weight of what had transpired lingered in the air, heavy and oppressive. Liam, thankfully, seemed blissfully unaware of the tension, but I couldn't help wondering how long we could shield him from it. I spent my nights tossing and turning, replaying Melissa's words over and over in my mind. It's not an affair. I didn't know how to bring it up. I never meant to hurt you. Each phrase felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, leaving me with more questions than answers. Was she telling the truth? Could I trust her? Or was I clinging to a hope that had already slipped away? My emotions swung wildly from anger to sadness to numbness. The anger burned the brightest, at Melissa for her betrayal, at Mike for his role in all of this, and even at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. But the sadness was the hardest to bear. It crept in during the quiet moments, filling the cracks left by my anger. Sadness for the life we'd built, the love we'd shared, and the future I wasn't sure we'd ever have again. One evening, I found myself sitting on the back porch, staring out at the yard where Liam's toys were scattered across the grass. I thought about what this would mean for him if things fell apart between Melissa and me. He deserved stability, a happy home where he could grow up feeling loved and secure. But how could I give him that when my own foundation felt like it was crumbling beneath me? Melissa joined me a few minutes later, her steps hesitant as she came to sit on the other side of the porch swing. We sat in silence for a while, the cool evening air wrapping around us like a fragile truce. "Adam," she said finally, her voice soft. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I need you to know that I never wanted this to happen. I made a mistake, but I want to fix it." I stared straight ahead, my jaw tightening. "How do you fix something like this, Melissa? How do you fix broken trust?" She didn't answer right away, and when she did, her voice wavered. "I don't know. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to go to counseling, talk to someone, anything to help us get back to where we were." Her words sounded sincere, but I wasn't sure if I could believe them. "And what about Mike?" I asked. "Are you still talking to him?" She shook her head quickly. "No. I told him it's over. There's no reason for us to see each other anymore. I'm cutting all ties." I wanted to believe her, to take her at her word and trust that she was being honest. But after everything that had happened, trust felt like an impossibility. "I need time," I said, my voice low. "I can't just flip a switch and pretend everything's okay." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I understand. I'll give you as much time as you need." That night, I slept on the couch, not because Melissa asked me to, but because I couldn't bring myself to lie next to her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her at that cafe with Mike, their easy smiles and the way they leaned into each other as if the rest of the world didn't exist. The emotional toll of the situation began to take its toll on my daily life. At work, I found it hard to focus, my thoughts drifting back to the confrontation and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. At home, I tried to put on a brave face for Liam, but I knew he could sense something was wrong. "Daddy, are you and Mommy okay?" he asked one evening, his big blue eyes filled with concern. "We're okay, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "We're just working through some things." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. How could I explain to a 6-year-old that his parents' marriage was hanging by a thread? As the days turned into weeks, I realized that the time to make a decision was approaching. I couldn't stay in limbo forever. Either Melissa and I would find a way to rebuild what had been broken, or we'd have to face the reality that our marriage was beyond repair. For now, all I could do was take it one day at a time, hoping that the answers I sought would reveal themselves in the quiet moments between the chaos. In the weeks that followed, Melissa made an effort to show she was serious about fixing our marriage. She suggested counseling, something neither of us had ever considered before. Though I was hesitant at first, I agreed to try it. I figured if there was any chance of salvaging what we had, I owed it to Liam, and maybe to myself, to give it a shot. Our first session was awkward and uncomfortable. We sat in a small, warmly lit office across from a therapist named Dr. Owens, who seemed patient but firm. Melissa spoke first, admitting to her mistakes and apologizing for the hurt she'd caused. "I know I betrayed Adam's trust," she said, her voice trembling. "I let things get too close with Mike, and I made terrible choices. But I never stopped loving Adam, and I want to make things right." Hearing her say those words brought a small flicker of hope. Maybe she really did regret what happened. Maybe we could find a way to move past this. When it was my turn to speak, I struggled to put my feelings into words. "I don't know how to trust you again," I admitted, my voice raw. "Every time I look at you, I think about the lies, the secrets, and how easy it was for you to hide all of it from me. I want to believe you're sorry, but I don't know if I can." Dr. Owens guided us through the session, encouraging open communication and setting small goals for rebuilding trust. By the end of it, I felt a cautious sense of relief. It wasn't a solution, but it was a step forward. Over the next few weeks, Melissa seemed genuinely committed to repairing our relationship. She stopped taking late-night phone calls and was transparent about her schedule, even sharing her location with me when she went out. She apologized again and again, each time looking more remorseful than the last. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Then, everything unraveled again. One evening, Liam and I were playing with his Lego set in the living room when he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Uncle Mike said he misses Mommy, Liam said, carefully attaching a piece to his growing tower. I froze. What do you mean, buddy? He called her on her phone yesterday when we were at the park. I heard her say his name. My stomach churned. Melissa had assured me she'd cut all ties with Mike, but Liam's words told a different story. I wanted to believe he was mistaken, that maybe he'd overheard an old voicemail or misunderstood something. But deep down, I knew better. That night, after Liam was asleep, I confronted Melissa again. Why is Mike still contacting you? I asked, my voice cold and sharp. She blinked in surprise, clearly caught off guard. What are you talking about? Liam heard you talking to him yesterday, I said, my hands trembling with anger. You told me you ended things. You promised me you wouldn't talk to him again. Her face crumbled, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then she sighed, her shoulders sagging with defeat. He called me, she admitted quietly. It wasn't planned. He just wanted to check in. Check in. I repeated, my voice rising. Melissa, are you kidding me? After everything we've been through, after everything you said about wanting to fix this, you're still talking to him? It wasn't like that, she insisted, tears streaming down her face. I told him we couldn't talk anymore. I told him I'm working on my marriage. It was one conversation, Adam. That's all. But her words felt hollow, like every excuse she'd given before. I shook my head, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me all over again. I can't do this, I said, my voice breaking. I gave you another chance, and you threw it away. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? Melissa sobbed, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Adam, please, she begged. I love you. I love our family. Don't give up on us. But I couldn't stay in the same room with her, not after hearing Liam's innocent slip-up and the lies she tried to cover it with. I grabbed my keys and left the house, needing space to think, to breathe, to process the reality of what was happening. As I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, my mind raced. I thought about Liam, about the life we'd built, and about the trust that had been shattered again and again. I realized that no matter how much I wanted to save our marriage, it was becoming clear that Melissa wasn't capable of the honesty and commitment it would take to rebuild. The thought of walking away was unbearable, but staying felt impossible. The second betrayal was a breaking point I hadn't seen coming, and I wasn't sure there was any way back from it. I drove for hours that night, the streets blurring into a haze of headlights and shadows. The weight of everything, the lies, the broken promises, the hope I tried so hard to hold on to, felt like an anchor pulling me under. By the time I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark and silent. Melissa must have gone to bed, or maybe she was lying awake, waiting for me to come home. I didn't go upstairs. Instead, I sank onto the couch, staring at the faint glow of the streetlights outside the window. My thoughts were a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and resignation. I knew what I had to do, but the idea of actually saying the words out loud felt impossible. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Liam's laughter from the kitchen. For a brief, fleeting moment, I let myself imagine that everything was normal, that the past few weeks had been nothing more than a bad dream. But reality came crashing back as I walked into the kitchen and saw Melissa at the stove, flipping pancakes with a forced smile on her face. Good morning, she said softly, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. "Morning," I muttered, ruffling Liam's hair as I sat down at the table. The tension between us was palpable, but we both played along for Liam's sake. He chattered happily about his plans for the day, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. After breakfast, Melissa asked Liam to play in the living room so we could talk. She turned to me, her expression somber. "Adam, we need to figure out where we go from here," she said, her voice trembling. I stared at her for a long moment, my heart heavy with the decision I'd made. "I've already figured it out," I said quietly. "I can't do this anymore, Melissa. I can't keep living like this, wondering if you're telling me the truth, waiting for the next betrayal. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to Liam." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I kept going. "I wanted to believe you. I wanted to believe we could fix this. But you've shown me, time and time again, that you're not willing to let go of whatever it is you have with Mike. And I can't be in a marriage where trust doesn't exist." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "I don't want to lose our family." "You already have," I said, my voice breaking. "The moment you let Liam become part of your lives, the moment you chose to keep seeing Mike, you lost us. I can't stay, Melissa. Not anymore." The words hung in the air, final and unyielding. She didn't argue or beg this time, maybe because she knew there was nothing left to say. Over the next few days, I began taking steps to separate our lives. I contacted a lawyer to start the divorce process, something I never imagined I'd have to do. I moved into the guest room and avoided being alone with Melissa as much as possible. Breaking the news to Liam was the hardest part. I waited until Melissa and I had worked out a plan to share custody, wanting to make the transition as smooth as possible for him. One evening, after dinner, I sat down with Liam in his room, surrounded by his toys and the comforting chaos of childhood. "Hey, buddy," I said gently, pulling him onto my lap. "I need to talk to you about something important." He looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. "What is it, Daddy?" I took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "Mommy and I love you so much. You're the most important thing in the world to us. But sometimes, moms and dads decide they can't live together anymore. It doesn't mean we don't care about each other, it just means we'll be happier living in different houses." Liam's face crumpled, and he clung to me tightly. "I don't want you to go, Daddy." "I know, buddy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to go either. But this isn't about you. Mommy and I are going to make sure you're happy and loved, no matter what. You'll still see both of us all the time." It broke my heart to see his tears, to know that he was caught in the middle of something he didn't deserve. But I also knew that staying in a broken marriage would only hurt him more in the long run. As I tucked him into bed that night, I made a silent promise to myself: no matter what happened between Melissa and me, I would always put Liam first. I would do everything in my power to give him the stability and love he needed to grow into the incredible person I knew he could be. The next chapter of our lives was about to begin, and though it terrified me, I knew it was the only way forward. The days after my decision felt like walking through a battlefield of emotions. Melissa and I lived in the same house, but it was clear we were moving in opposite directions. She tried to reach out occasionally, asking if we could talk or if I'd reconsider, but I kept my answers short. The damage had been done, and I couldn't see a path where we'd come back from it. The divorce process began to take shape. Our lawyer-mediated discussions were civil but painfully distant. I made it clear that my primary concern was Liam, and thankfully, Melissa agreed to prioritize his well-being. We decided on joint custody, with Liam splitting time between our homes once I found a place of my own. Outside the confines of our house, word of our separation began to spread. Friends and family started calling, some offering support, others fishing for details. I wasn't interested in airing our dirty laundry, but the story began to take on a life of its own, especially when Melissa's connection to Mike came to light. I hadn't planned to tell anyone about Mike, but the small town we lived in had its way of uncovering secrets. People started whispering about how Melissa had been seen with him, how they'd been spending time together long before I found out. The gossip was relentless, and it eventually reached Melissa's boutique. One afternoon, I picked Liam up from school and ran into one of Melissa's friends in the parking lot. She gave me a look that was equal parts pity and judgment. "I heard about everything," she said, lowering her voice. "I'm so sorry, Adam. You didn't deserve that." I nodded, offering a tight smile, but her words stuck with me. The news had traveled farther than I'd expected, and it was starting to have real consequences for Melissa. Her boutique, once a thriving hub of activity, began to lose customers. People who once supported her business suddenly stopped showing up, and her social media pages became quieter. I overheard her on the phone one evening, talking to a friend about how difficult things had become. "I don't understand why everyone's turning on me," she said, her voice thick with frustration. "I made a mistake, but that doesn't mean they get to judge me like this." Hearing her talk about her struggles should have made me feel vindicated, but it didn't. If anything, it made me sad. Melissa was reaping the consequences of her actions, but the fallout wasn't just affecting her, it was affecting Liam, too. I made a conscious effort to shield him from the tension. When he was with me, I focused on creating a sense of normalcy. We went to the park, built elaborate Lego castles, and had movie nights on the couch. I wanted him to feel safe and loved, even as the world around us shifted. Melissa tried to maintain her relationship with Liam, but her connection to Mike made it complicated. One evening, after picking Liam up from her house, he mentioned something that made my heart sink. "Mommy and Uncle Mike were talking in the kitchen," he said, his voice casual. "She said he might come to my soccer game." I clenched the steering wheel, anger and disbelief flooding through me. I'd made it clear to Melissa that Mike's involvement in our lives was unacceptable, especially where Liam was concerned. Yet here she was, crossing another boundary. When I got home, I called her immediately. "Melissa, we need to talk about Mike," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She sighed on the other end of the line. "What now, Adam?" "Liam just told me that Mike might come to his soccer game." "That's not happening," I said firmly. "He doesn't need to be around our son. This is about boundaries, Melissa, and you're crossing them." She hesitated before responding. "Adam, he's a friend. He cares about Liam too." "No," I snapped. "He's not Liam's friend. He's not family. And he's not part of Liam's life. This isn't up for debate." There was a long pause, and then she muttered, "Fine." I hung up, my hands shaking with frustration. I hated having to fight these battles, but I refused to let Mike become a fixture in Liam's life. He didn't deserve to be part of this, not after everything he'd done to our family. As the weeks passed, Melissa's life continued to unravel. Her boutique struggled, her social circle grew smaller, and her relationship with Mike seemed to cause more problems than it solved. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my own life. I found a small apartment not far from Liam's school, a cozy space that I hoped would feel like home for both of us. It wasn't easy starting over, but I felt a sense of relief knowing I was taking control of my future. Through it all, I leaned on my family and close friends for support. They reminded me that I was doing the right thing, even when it felt like the hardest thing in the world. Slowly but surely, I began to see a path forward, one where Liam and I could find happiness, even if it looked different from what I'd once imagined. Moving into the new apartment felt like a fresh start, but it also came with its challenges. The first night was the hardest. After putting Liam to bed in his new room, a space I'd decorated with his favorite superheroes and bright colors, I sat on the couch in the living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and let the weight of everything settle over me. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the bustling home I'd left behind. For years, that house had been a symbol of family, love, and stability. Now, it felt like I was carving out a new identity, one piece at a time. But as difficult as it was, there was also a sense of hope. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life instead of being swept along by circumstances. I threw myself into building a routine for Liam and me. I picked him up from school every weekday, cooked dinners, and helped him with his homework. On the weekends, we explored our new neighborhood, finding parks, bookstores, and a tiny diner where we quickly became regulars. At first, Liam struggled with the changes. He missed the old house, his room, and the comfort of having both parents under one roof. But over time, he began to adjust. I saw him smile more, laugh more, and grow more comfortable in our new life. For me, rebuilding wasn't just about creating a home for Liam, it was also about rediscovering who I was outside of my role as a husband. I started running in the mornings, a habit I'd abandoned years ago. I reconnected with old friends, went to trivia nights, and even picked up woodworking as a hobby, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. My job became a source of stability, a place where I could focus and feel competent. My colleagues, who knew bits and pieces of what I was going through, offered quiet support. They didn't press for details, but their kindness reminded me that I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Melissa's life seemed to continue its downward spiral. She tried to maintain her boutique, but the damage to her reputation made it difficult. She also struggled to navigate her new relationship with Mike, which, from what I heard, was already starting to fracture under the pressure of our divorce and the whispers of the town. Despite my anger toward her, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Melissa wasn't just my ex-wife, she was the mother of my child, someone I'd once loved deeply. Her choices had led to her struggles, but I didn't wish her misery. I just wanted peace for both of us, especially for Liam's sake. Co-parenting wasn't easy, but we found a way to make it work. We communicated primarily through a shared calendar and text messages, keeping things cordial but distant. I kept my boundaries firm, ensuring that Liam's time with me was uninterrupted and free from the complications of Melissa's personal life. One evening, as I was tucking Liam into bed, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Daddy, are you happy now?" The question hit me like a ton of bricks. I looked at his little face, so full of innocence and curiosity, and realized how perceptive he was. "I'm getting there, buddy," I said honestly. "It's a process, but I'm working on it." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm happy when I'm with you." His words brought a lump to my throat, but they also filled me with a sense of purpose. No matter how difficult the journey, I was doing this for him, for both of us. As time went on, I started to feel a sense of closure. The wounds Melissa's betrayal had left were still there, but they were beginning to heal. I stopped replaying the past in my head and started looking toward the future. One day, I sat down at my laptop and began writing a list of goals, things I wanted to accomplish, experiences I wanted to share with Liam, and personal milestones I hoped to reach. It wasn't about erasing the past but about creating a new chapter, one filled with possibility and growth. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Life didn't look the way I'd imagined it would, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Liam and I were building something new, something strong, and I knew we'd be okay. Looking back on everything that happened, it feels like a lifetime ago. The pain of Melissa's betrayal, the uncertainty of starting over, the fear of how it would affect Liam, all of it shaped me in ways I didn't fully understand at the time. Now, standing here in my apartment, watching Liam build a Lego spaceship on the coffee table, I feel a sense of peace I never thought I'd find. Life isn't perfect, it never will be, but it's real, honest, and mine. The divorce was finalized a few months ago, and while it wasn't the outcome I'd wanted when I first married Melissa, it was the one we needed. We've settled into a rhythm of co-parenting, and though our interactions remain polite and distant, we've managed to create a stable environment for Liam. Melissa seems to be learning from her mistakes. She hasn't mentioned Mike in a long time, and from what I've heard, their relationship fizzled out soon after the divorce. I hope she finds her own version of peace, not just for her sake, but for Liam's. As for me, I've learned more about myself in the past year than I did in the previous decade. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can weather storms I once thought would break me. I've learned that trust is fragile but essential, and that rebuilding it requires time, effort, and honesty. Most importantly, I've learned that life goes on. It doesn't stop for heartbreak or betrayal, it keeps moving, giving us opportunities to grow, heal, and start again. If there's one piece of advice I'd offer to anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't lose yourself in the pain. Let yourself grieve, feel the anger, and process the loss, but don't let it define you. Take it one day at a time, and eventually, you'll find your way to the other side. For Liam, this new life seems to suit him. He's adjusted to the back and forth of shared custody, and his smile is as bright as ever. He's thriving in school, making friends, and asking endless questions about the world around him. Watching him grow has been the greatest gift through all of this, a constant reminder of what truly matters. Sometimes, when I see him laugh or tell me a story about his day, I wonder if he remembers the time before everything changed. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Either way, I'm determined to give him a life filled with love, stability, and the confidence to navigate his own challenges one day. As for me, I've started to look forward again. I've set goals for my career, joined a local running club, and even dipped my toes into the idea of dating again. It's daunting, sure, but I know now that I don't need someone else to complete me. If the right person comes along, it'll be a bonus, not a necessity. Tonight, after I tuck Liam into bed, I'll pour myself a glass of wine, sit on the balcony, and reflect on how far we've come. Life is different now, but it's good in its own way. The scars of the past will always be there, faint reminders of a time when everything fell apart. But they no longer define me. Instead, they're proof of my resilience, of the strength it took to rebuild from the ground up. As I watch Liam put the finishing touches on his Lego masterpiece, I feel a swell of pride. We've built something solid, something lasting, and it's more than enough. Life isn't always easy, but it's always worth living. And for the first time in a long time, I can truly say that I'm happy.